Let's jump right into today's topic. Are you ready for a massive reality check? We constantly hear this phrase, if a woman makes her own money, she won't have to take any abuse at home. We all just naturally assume that money equals independence, and independence equals safety. But is that actually true? Today, we're going to use an incredibly hardcore research paper to completely shatter this massive myth about money and domestic violence. In this deep dive, we're going into ancient DNA and modern data spanning thousands of years to uncover the ancestral violence code hidden right beneath the surface of our everyday lives.
Section 1. More independent, but more abused? I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive, right? But let's look at what the research actually says.
We always assume that financial independence is the ultimate shield for women. So here's the big question. If a woman gets a job, does she actually become safer at home? Our gut instinct tells us that once there's an income, the cost and hesitation for a man to commit domestic violence must go up. But when economists laid out the cold, hard data, it told a terrifying story that's the exact opposite of what we'd expect.
Look at this number. Get ready for a slap in the face. According to massive demographic and health surveys conducted across Africa, women who are currently working don't see a drop in domestic violence risk. Instead, it shockingly increases by 4.3%, meaning going to work didn't buy them safety, it actually made them more likely to be beaten. How is this even possible? Why would this happen?
To solve this mystery, researchers essentially turned into historical detectives. Look at this wild methodology. First, they gathered health survey data from a whopping 96,000 modern women. And then, they did something absolutely crazy. They precision-matched this modern data with ancient ethnographic atlases from thousands of years ago. They tried to bridge millennia to decode the connections hidden in human bloodlines. And the results completely overturned everything we thought we knew. Moving to Section 2, bride price is actually a protective charm? Let's unpack what's really going on here.
Seeing this, we might have to completely rethink our preconceived notions about an ancient tradition. Put aside all the modern internet outrage about bride price for a second. Historically, if a custom demanded that a man pay wealth to marry a bride, it absolutely didn't mean she was just an object being bought and sold. On the contrary, in ancient times, this was a hardcore economic indicator. It meant her labor capacity and her life were highly valued back then. Because she was expensive, she was extremely precious. And the impact of this ancient custom has actually survived all the way to today. Look at this. The data shows it clear as day. Women whose ancestors came from a bride price paying culture see their probability of suffering domestic violence today plummet by a full 11.5%. Who would have thought that an ancient culture's economic validation of a woman's value would travel through time to become a literal shield protecting modern women today?
Up next is Section 3, the violence code of gathering versus agriculture. Let's see how prehistoric economies shape our present. Honestly, historical inertia is far more terrifying than we imagine. Look at the comparison on screen. If your ancestors made a living by gathering berries, women were economic equals or even leaders in that society. But what if your ancestors used heavy plows to farm or relied on hunting? It's a no-brainer. That was absolutely a male-dominated world of heavy physical labor. The most shocking part is that this cultural baseline, formed thousands of years ago, has survived perfectly intact to this very day.
Data never lies. Look at this bar chart. Women whose ancestors used a plow for agriculture are a staggering 13.2% more likely to be beaten by their husbands at home today. What does this prove? It shows that those ancient job descriptions, those farming tools that belong in museums, are still haunting modern living rooms like ghosts.
Section 4. The deadly paradox for working women. This brings us right back to our opening question.
Since these ancient genes are so powerful, why does the modern workplace act as a trigger? Academia calls this the male backlash theory. Simply put, if your ancestral code dictates that men must be the sole breadwinners, then when a modern woman brings home her own paycheck, that money isn't seen by the man as a helpful family subsidy. It's seen as an absolute threat. It's a direct provocation to his thousands of years of authority. So what does he do to regain control? He uses the most primitive tool available, his fists. Take a look at this table. The logic is incredibly clear. The fundamental prerequisite for a modern paycheck to trigger a violent backlash is this. The ancient culture never viewed women as equal economic entities in the first place. See, if your ancestors were gatherers who valued women, then going to work today acts as your armor. But if your ancestral culture was extremely patriarchal, today's paycheck isn't just failing to protect you, it actually puts a target on your back.
Section 5.
the hidden loopholes in the data. Before we blindly believe everything, we have to look at the flip side of the coin.
Everything we just discussed sounds airtight, right? But before we jump to ultimate conclusions, we have to look at the unavoidable loopholes in this data. Notice this urban paradox. On the surface, the data shows urban women report getting beaten a lot more often. But what's really interesting is that this exact same group of urban women firmly states they absolutely do not accept domestic violence in any form. So, what does this actually tell us?
This actually exposes a major limitation of the study. The high rates of reported violence in cities might not mean they're actually being beaten more. It's highly likely it just means urban women finally have the courage and the channels to speak up about it. Conversely, in remote nomadic tribes, domestic violence data looks super low, like everything is peaceful. But is it really peace? Not at all. It's a dead silence caused by the fear of violence. Not to mention, a lot of male respondents universally lied and hid the truth during surveys just to protect their own glowing image.
So, where does this leave us? What should we really take away from this report? The conclusion on this slide hits the nail right on the head. Think about it. You absolutely cannot eradicate violence rooted deep inside a home just by rolling out a modern economic policy or simply by handing a woman a paycheck. As long as you ignore the ancient codes hidden in our cultural DNA, any modern solution is barely scratching the surface.
All right, which brings us to our final thought for today. Before we wrap up our analysis, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. Think about it. If the lifestyles of our ancestors from thousands of years ago are still acting like ghosts, dictating the safety of countless women in their own living rooms today, then can a simple paycheck ever really buy true freedom? It's a question that's as chilling as it is fascinating, and it's something we all need to think deeply about. Thanks so much for joining me today to explore this complex topic, and I'll see you in the next one.